Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Vanessa Dunn, Guyton, and I am the proud founder and executive director of Hush No More. Hush No More supports survivors when they're ready to come forward to share their story, to find resources, or just to have someone to listen to. We also provide training in our different communities, different organizations, churches, youth groups, because I believe that awareness plus knowledge equals prevention. So, thank you for joining us tonight. It is so important that we have conversations this month while it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I am coming off of a joyful high because we had an amazing domestic violence walk on Saturday. People came out, they showed love. We had survivors that did some amazing things, performers, we ate and we just hugged on each other, loved, walked, did some great exercise, and did it for a purpose. And so I thank every single person that came out, all of my sponsors and vendors. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. So we're going to continue this Domestic Violence Awareness Month conversation. And I am important learning about knowledge. Tonight, we're going to talk about the legal aspects of domestic violence. And for that reason, I have a special guest tonight. So let me bring her on. Hello, attorney Kelly Durden Posey. Welcome to Hush No More Champions.
Hi, glad to be back. Glad to be here. How are
I'm
you?
so thankful. We're going to talk about the legal aspects of domestic violence. And I don't think a lot of people understand that they have legal rights. And so I want us to get into that tonight, just to give people information so that you can go in your state, your city, your county, and find out information that can be very useful to you. So tell us a little bit about Attorney Kelly. Tell us about you.
Well, I've been practicing for about 15 years now. I've been licensed for about 15 years here in North Carolina. And I did the bulk of my practice in a courtroom representing victims of domestic violence with Legal Aid of North Carolina and Legal Services of North Carolina through some different projects that I got into. I love to serve um, people who really either can't afford the services or aren't aware of how to reach them. And in doing that, I was able to reach a lot of underrepresented communities. Just because somebody can't afford to get the things they need, I still want them to be able to have access to it. And if an attorney is not what you feel like you want to help you in court, if you feel like you can do it yourself, I want to help empower you to do that too. So that's the type of practice that I had. And once I finished that, I tried to do some of that advocacy work in corporate and found that maybe what was best for me was some combination of those things in helping people advocate for themselves and teaching others about underrepresented communities and how to best include and support them. So now I am the owner of Inspired Inclusivity Consulting, where I am the lead thank you, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. So combine all those things in my business now.
I love it. I love it. I think it's important that we have people that have a lens of victim advocacy, but also from a legal perspective, a heart perspective. And you talk a lot about inclusivity and
Mhm.
diversity. And so I think that's important as well. And it does all come together in our court system. And it should, even when it doesn't. You talked about legal aid. I don't think people realize that in their states that there are legal aid organizations. Can you speak on that for us? At least tell us what that is.
Yes. Right. So here in North Carolina, we have a few different organizations that are considered nonprofits and that they don't ask for money up front from the people they represent. But the main organization here is Legal Aid of North Carolina, and they are a legal services provider, which means they get government funding to support some of the work that they're doing. And there's at least one legal services corporation funded organization in almost every state. And they have specific initiatives that are most responsive to people who identify as being low income. One of those areas is domestic violence advocacy. So, in almost every state, there's some nonprofit organization that is doing this work, supporting survivors and victims of domestic violence.
I love it people don't realize that. And it's important that you do your research at the beginning. Start finding out resources that are available. I live in South Carolina. We have South Carolina, the legal aid services of South Carolina. And if
Right.
it's domestic violence, they represent you for free. It doesn't matter about your income.
Right.
And so it's important that we realize that and that we can share that information with other victims so that they know that there's a resource out there so that legally they can
Yes.
get out of their marriage for free. Like they're trying to pay for a
Mm.
divorce, they don't even have to pay for it. I just
There's so many nuances, and I will say that one of the things that we know affects people very closely is their relationships, right? So if whether you're married or not, if there's something going on that you really need assistance with protecting yourself from, that's so essential to people's day-to-day lives. So that's one of the reasons this is funded, and you don't have to come out of your pocket to get that assistance.
and I think sometimes people are scared because they don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of the things that keep people in relationships because they don't know how they could financially get out of the situation that they're in. And so there are resources. We just have to get out there and find them and share them with each other. So that's important to me as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, we were talking about protection. You mentioned protection. What are some legal protection rights in various states, specifically in North Carolina, where you practice, that people can use to protect themselves?
Well, one of the things that, well, here in North Carolina, there's two statutes, two laws on the books that people can use to get protection, and it is completely dependent about the relationship that you have with the other person that you're trying to get protection from. So the statutes here are 50B and 50C. And so you might hear someone say, "Oh, I need a protective order," or "I need a 50B." And what they're really saying is, "I want protection under this particular statute." So 50B says if you've got some prior relationship with this person, whether that was a romantic relationship, a landlord tenant, or a family relationship, then it's domestic in nature. There's some relationship. So that person has a little different knowledge and insight into you. So you need a different type of protection. In fact, that protection needs to come with a really quick way to get help if that person violates it. So for a domestic violence protective order here, or an order of protection, the way to enforce it is by calling the police. There are criminal ramifications for violating a domestic violence protective order. Now, for a 50C, it's also called a civil no contact order. And this, and I remember this, the very first case I took, I don't even think I was out of law school. I think I was working with a mentor, family law attorney, a domestic violence attorney with legal aid in Durham. And my very first case was a 50C case. And they called it like the nasty neighbor protective order, because what it did is if you didn't have a relationship with that person, you were never in a romantic relationship, never lived together, they're not family, they're basically a stranger to you and they're bothering you and you want it to stop. In that situation, there was a neighbor who was extremely rude, harassing. I think he laid down in a ditch and played a trumpet early in the morning just to aggravate the neighbor. And the only thing that they could do, the only recourse they had, was a no contact order. So this person would stay a certain distance away from them, not harass them, not stalk them, keep coming to their house, and just stay away. But it is called a civil order because the way it's enforced is by filing a civil action and coming to court and saying, "Hey, this person didn't do what you told them they needed to do." And through that, they have to put it on the calendar, give notice, show up, and then argue their case. So there's not that immediacy of being able to call the police. It's a little different.
When you have a protection order in place, right?
Mhm.
Are they easy to get in your state?
Well, um, if you have the right resources and you have an understanding of what they're really for, they can be easy to get. I think One of the things I love about North Carolina is that even if you are in an extremely rural county, like I've practiced in courtrooms that counties that have literally one courtroom. When you open the door, you're walking into the courtroom. Jones County, I'm looking at you. And when you are in a place like that, um, you worry that all of your business is going to be, right there on Front Street. Literally, anyone that walks into the courtroom will be able to hear it. And if you maybe are in a relationship with someone who's prominent in that area, you don't know that anybody is there to support you or be in your corner or just, kind of quietly cheering for you in the background. It may feel very isolating and very intimidating, especially if this person has already exerted some sort of um, dominance over you or control. So, throughout North Carolina, there are victim advocacy agencies. And I know that legal aid, like I said, legal aid covers every county in North Carolina to the extent that they have enough resources to, have somebody there for every court appearance. But there are also other organizations that will send someone there to be a victim advocate and just sit with you, just even maybe hold your hand or just be right behind you while you're speaking to the judge and just give you that support to help you feel like, you know what, this may be really tough for me, but I'm going to get through it. I'm going to get to the other side of this. And there's support and help waiting there for me.
I have had clients that have came to me who wanted a protection order, but we didn't have any evidence.
Mm.
So it was really hard to go to the court and get a protection order when there's no evidence. You never called the police. You've never told anybody that this abuse have been going on. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times my advice to clients is when they ask me that, this is something that you can consider is calling the police, even if you're not ready to leave at that moment, but at least there's a record that the police have been to the house before and that there has been some type of activity that has been going on. You want a documentation because when I've tried to help those who are trying to get away, it's harder when you've never called the police, when you've never told anybody,
Yes.
you've stayed silent. And so that's one of the recommendations that I have people to consider. At the end of the day, it's your choice. But if you're not protecting yourself and not calling the police, when we go to the police, they're like, well, there's no evidence that any of this has occurred. And so it's hard for us to try to create an order to protect you. Have you seen that before?
Well, I've seen that a lot actually. Um, and there are so many reasons for that. I mean,
A lot of reasons.
unfortunately, so even by the nature of what the the threat is, there may just not be any evidence. If someone makes a verbal threat, if someone is communicating a threat, I mean, it's hard to say this happened or this didn't happen. But one of the and I'll say there are a number of domestic violence advocacy agencies that are informing police officers, sheriff's deputies, um, and court officials of the power dynamic in a domestic violence situation so that they're not just going in and saying, I don't know anything about anything. I just want to hear and see who I believe. They're trained to see those subtle nuances that how you act when that other person is around or they're trained to look for certain markers on you or on them to be able to tell who may have been the aggressor or if something happened at all, right? So even if you feel like there's no evidence, there probably is something. Or you can make sure that you tell someone in a way that even if you're not ready to move forward with it right now, you've got someone who can say, yeah, I remember seeing her on that day. I do remember she was really, she canceled an appointment with me because X, Y, and Z happened. So you're still creating that paper trail in a way that gives more support to the things that you're saying. So it's rare that there's absolutely nothing at all that can support what you're saying. But in the cases where there are, that doesn't mean that you can't get a protective order. That just means that you've got to give a little more information about the situation so they can understand a little better what's happening.
And an advocate definitely, like you said, they would
Mm.
definitely go to court with you. They will document that you've been calling them, talking to them, that you have been fearful. I've done
Mhm.
it. And so it's
Mhm.
important. If you don't trust people in your community, you have a hard time talking to your friends, that's what advocates are there for
Yeah.
you to communicate with them and talk it over and come up with
Mhm.
some options and some resources for you so you're not alone. And they do go to court with you. They do. No matter what, we're staying right there with you. And so I don't want people to be fearful of the legal process thinking that they're by themselves. So I'm so glad that you said that. But I hear so many people like they don't have any evidence and so they kind of give up. That makes them go into a shell.
Well, on the flip side of that, I hear negative evidence, right? So the only thing that might be a little worse than not having any evidence at all is having called the police and then not followed through, or initiated a protective order and not followed through. And even though you may feel embarrassed or nervous that that's going to be held against you, as long as you're honest about what happened, um, that can, to the right judge, the way that you present it, that can still help you get the support and help that you need. Anyone who has been doing this work for any amount of time, supporting survivors, understands nobody can just say, you know what, I'm just going to leave everything behind, especially if it's been going on for a long time. And all we want you to do is when you feel ready, try, you know, and then try again, and then try again, and try again. It doesn't matter how many times you come, as long as you come. You are doing what you need to do to keep yourself safe. And I never want to blame anybody for how that looks. It's different for every situation. So just keep trying. There is support no matter how often you come forward.
I like to help you find evidence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you come to me because I've actually went to one of the counties and they weren't nice. And sometimes you're going to run into officers or officials that just are not nice.
Very
And
true.
I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, this what we ran into. This how we gonna go around it. This what we
Okay.
gonna do. 'Cause
Right.
we gonna get it done. We're gonna have to go around
Hmm.
it. Courtney says when their partner abuser is the police, law enforcement overlook it, sweep it under the rug. That's a problem. I agree. It's really hard if your spouse is in law enforcement. And that's why you have to definitely get evidence. And that's why, to me, an advocate and a domestic violence attorney is really important if you are married to somebody in law enforcement. You got to
Hmm.
learn the law, period.
Very true. Very true. And there, I mean, I think that idea that there is kind of a fraternal order that really look out for one another, that's true. I mean, it's true across the board. Now, whether that pushes people to do certain things that are unsavory, that's case by case. But I certainly know I've known people who have gotten protective orders against people who they're married to that are law enforcement. It's definitely a thing that can happen, but they know the system, So on a very basic level, what they have that you don't have is that knowledge of the system, and so you need someone in your corner to help support you. I mean, people are there, but you have to look for them. You know.
They're there. When you look at a divorce, right, and it's based on domestic violence, can you explain the difference of a family lawyer, a family law lawyer, or a domestic violence? How can the two help you?
Well, I'll say I worked at Legal Aid for a long time, and they get a bad rep for people thinking, oh, well, it's young attorneys, inexperienced attorneys, or somebody who just couldn't do anything else. Because, they don't get a whole lot of financial compensation for the work they do. But really, any of us who stay with Legal Aid for any amount of time really just care. We want to be able to sleep at night feeling like we did everything that we could to help somebody who otherwise might not be able to get what they needed. And so there's a different dedication there. And because we don't have to charge for those services, we get a chance to do the same thing every single day. And when you do that, you get really good at it. So we may know some nuances that a family law attorney who is doing more general practice about family law might not be as familiar with. We may be involved with some different types of advocacy that they just don't have time for because they're doing a lot of other things. Now, usually that just means it's a great idea for them to partner with someone from legal aid who can bring them up to speed if it's not a thing that they were familiar with before. And we're usually very generous with the information that we share with private attorneys because we really just want people to get help. There's no we don't have any ownership of representing victims of domestic violence, but not every family law attorney is from. It's like a your general practitioner doctor. They're gonna know a little something about broken bones, but they're not gonna know the same thing as an orthopedic doctor who does that all day every day.
So you want to go to an attorney that is specific in the things that you're looking for.
Yeah, to the extent that you can. Mostly their demeanor when they speak with you is going to be more supportive. And a lot of family law attorneys do say that they will help you in cases of domestic violence. They know the types of relief that you might need and kind of the urgency of it when you do make the decision to separate from a relationship like that. So I wouldn't just pick any family law attorney if that's a piece that you have going on. I would be specific about finding someone who is marketing themselves in a way that makes you feel comfortable, you know. And that's really what it boils down to at the end of the day. Do you feel comfortable with this attorney? Do you feel like they have your best interest in mind? If you do, run with it.
I want my attorney to be just as upset as I am. Like, I want to hear your passion.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear that you upset and that we're going to make
Mm-hmm.
something happen. I don't want you to be sitting there like this and just looking at me. I want to see that you
Mm-hmm.
are going to be making some moves. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important. Like, I interview attorneys and I want to see what you're going to say. And sometimes you have to pay to interview one just to have that consultation. But I'll pay it because I want to make sure that you are the one that's going to battle for me. I had a client in the state of South Carolina. You have to be separated for a year before you can get a divorce, right? But if it's domestic violence, who wants to stay married for a year? So you can get a faster divorce if it's domestic violence, right? But if that attorney doesn't know that or isn't as passionate in trying to get you out of it or even believe you, because sometimes they don't believe what you say, um,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the one for you, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. Like I've told clients, you need to go find you a different attorney because you should be out of this marriage by now and not doing or not building, helping you build a case. And so that's something
Mm-hmm.
that you should be looking for, I think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Speak on more of what you really want to look for in an attorney if it's involving domestic violence.
Yeah, that zealous advocacy where you feel like they have heard you, they believe you, and they are going to tell you what options are available to you. You know, but I also want to suggest that you want to find an attorney that asks you what you want. Um, because in North Carolina, there's not that immediacy where you can end the relationship in less than a year. You have to have that separation. Now you can have protection during that year, but that's that's a piece that you have to kind of just get through. So if you've got an attorney who, and there are a lot of type A attorneys, as I have met, but some of those attorneys are really aggressive in the way that they even talk to their client. And what they're saying is, oh, you've got a great case. We're going to take him for everything that he has. And that might not be what you want to do. You may have children with this person and you want to be gentle in the approach of ending that part of the relationship because you know there's going to be more that you have to communicate with them later. I always say, you know your spouse better than any attorney ever will. And so your voice is valuable in helping build the case. If you don't have an attorney that's doing that, keep on looking. Not only do they not understand you, they don't understand domestic violence. So just be sure that you feel comfortable with that person. If you want them to take the lead and you want to do everything you can, fine. But be sure that is what you want before you hear it from them.
I like it. Can you dismiss a lawyer once you've hired a lawyer? Can you
Absolutely. You can. Now, you don't want to put yourself in a bad situation. And so if you decide that an attorney is you're not either of you just don't want to be around them, they don't um, give you the vibe that you feel you need in order to keep working with them, whatever it is. If you decide to dismiss them, you just need to be vocal about that. You need to tell them, and you can also inform the court. You want to be mindful of whether there is an upcoming court date. Often, a judge will make sure that if there is a pending court date, especially if it's really soon, that you understand the ramifications of dismissing your attorney, and you've got something else lined up, or they may ask if you feel like you need a continuance. But especially in a domestic violence situation, the other side may become extremely aggressive at a time where they feel you're very vulnerable. So you want to keep all of that in mind when you make a decision like that. Be sure that you know all aspects of what's happening, and you've made that decision knowingly, and you've got a plan about what you're going to do next if you dismiss your attorney.
I always wondered that, like the process, and could I? I remember one time I wanted to dismiss my realtor. So sometimes things just don't always work out right, and so you want to
That's true.
know the legal parts of just finding the right attorney for you, the right
Hmm.
attorney for you.
Always.
I have a lot of followers that are part of the LGBTQT plus community, and I wanted you to speak to that. Do they have a right
Mhm.
to having an attorney represent them? And are there any rules as it relates to intimate partner violence?
Yes, yes. So here in North Carolina, and I'm gonna be very specific about that because I do not know if it's this way everywhere. Um, yes, you can get a protective order for someone um, that you've been in a relationship with. You've got that prior relationship. It does not necessarily have to be a person of the opposite sex. Um, but it did used to. So it's very important to make that distinction. There was a time where it literally said on the protective order you had to be of opposite sex. It does not say that anymore, so that it can be more inclusive of different gender identity, gender expression, and sex assigned at birth. However you identify across the board, if you meet the other criteria listed on the face of the protective order, then you're subject to be able to use that. If you do not meet that requirement, then you've got to use the civil no contact order, and that's what it had been in the past. Um, but I do want to point out that even if you can't get a domestic violence protective order for whatever reason, you still have all the protection of the criminal law. So if you're in a situation where someone is hitting you, doesn't matter what your relationship is to them, that's still a crime. Assault is a crime. The end. If someone is communicating threats to you, that's still a crime. And so you can report it as such. You can call the police, you can contact the magistrate and let them know, this act has occurred and I want to be sure that this person is, kept away from me. And then as a part of certain criminal cases, you can request a no contact order, and that can be put in whatever, even if there's a continuance, they can say that that person is not to contact you. And that would give you some protection. So, yes, to answer your question again, yes, there are protections for people who identify as LGBTQ plus, and even if for some reason your situation didn't quite fit under 50B here in North Carolina, you still can notify the police if there's a crime committed.
Like it. I think that's important because sometimes people feel
Mhm.
like they don't have any rights or there's
Right.
nothing that can be done. There's always something that we can do. I don't want people to shy away from it or feel like nobody is listening or care. You can come forward and we could figure out based on your state what laws are available to you.
Right. Exactly. There's always something, even
There's
if that
always
thing
something.
is just getting away, you know, there's always something.
What about for family members? Because people don't realize that domestic violence is not just husband and wife. right? People look at
Mhm.
that all the time, that it's a relationship. It could be a sister and a
Mhm.
brother. And how does it work for that dynamic?
The same way, actually. It's easier, because, I mean, if you're I would say blood relationship, but, if it's even through marriage, if you've got that requisite relationship, you can use the 50B. Now, the things that'll be slightly different are, and what I love about the forms here in North Carolina is that it's a standard form used throughout North Carolina, no matter what courtroom you're going into. And there are check boxes. So if you have children together, there are provisions that you'll need to put in about how you're going to interact with the children, and your home and your place of work are the most vulnerable places, and so those are listed there. And if a judge orders, or if you and the opposing party agree, you can put provisions in there to have protection at your place of business or at your home. That is the same thing with siblings, mother or parent and child, whatever relationship it is. All of those same check boxes are still there. And so it's, and you can consent and agree to a lot more than what a judge could just order. And so it's always a good idea to see if there's any way to agree to anything. But in terms of the familial relationship, there's not a real difference between what you can get in terms of protection.
Got it. And I think people always put the two and two together. So I wanted to make sure that I made that distinction. And
Mhm.
what if you're disabled? What protections are
Mhm.
in place for those that are disabled?
So I will say I don't know necessarily that any courtroom is guaranteed to be accessible to a person with a disability. And so I always recommend that if you have any type of disability that you feel you may need an accommodation for, that you research that piece on top of whatever is listed, in the protective order. So, in working with any of the advocacy groups, if you need wheelchair accessibility, make sure that the courthouse is wheelchair accessible. They are not always. And even if they are, they're still, it might put you in a vulnerable position just even going there and using whatever accessible entrance they might have. So it's helpful to have an advocate with you to walk you through that process if that's what you need. If you're hard of hearing and you need assistance in the courtroom, they usually have amplifying devices, so that you can hear what the judge is saying. But you do need to make sure that you make that need known ahead of being in court in front of a judge. And so asking whatever victim advocacy organization you're working with, hey, I understand I have this disability. I'm wondering if there's an accommodation that can be made. I'm not even sure what you all might have, but just asking that question, any given advocate group is going to say, let me find out, or I already know, and here's what it is. But, you know, the hard part about having a disability and being in a domestic violence situation is that that might be a thing that person is using to control you or exert power over you or gaslight you or whatever they're doing. And so you're in a particularly vulnerable position, and you may feel, or you may be told, that you're not going to be able to get any help. That is just not true. The help is there, but you've got to make sure that you avail yourself of it and take the steps appropriate to protect yourself while you do it.
Right. I never want people that have a disability to be fearful of coming forward and
Mm-hmm.
stating that, because it allows us to be able to help you. We can't
Mm-hmm.
help you if we don't know. And that is always my goal. How can I help you? How can I make this situation a little bit easier for you, considering you've been through so much? So come forward and ask and speak up and tell us what's going on, because then we could put things in place to help you through the process.
Right. And I think it's even harder if there's something that is either undiagnosed or unseen. So one of the things I love to do is advocate for people who are neurodiverse. meaning there is some way that their brain is wired that's different than the average, maybe I will say majority of people who we would call neurotypical. Um, that actually includes a lot of different types of conditions, but probably some of the most well known would be autism, ADHD, dyslexia. And if any of those things are present, it may be difficult for you to understand the paperwork or understand what's happening in the court process, um, or speak for yourself in a way that is easily understood and clearly states what happened and what you're seeking. And so, if you feel that you have any of those sensitivities or any of those differences in the way that you learn, by all means, tell someone. Don't feel worried or concerned that they're not going to be able to relate to you or understand. If they don't understand it, please tell them. Please help them understand. Even if you are not diagnosed, but you feel like I have some trouble reading, tell them that. Tell them that, because there may be things that you're asked to read quickly in court, review quickly. And if you're the only person that can say, yes, this is true, or yes, this is what I want it to be, don't worry about how long they wait for you. Let somebody, make sure somebody reads it to you so that you understand. The court can only do so much before it feels like advocacy, and they can't take it that far. But victim advocates can, and if you need that, you need to speak up and tell someone. That also applies to people who maybe speak a different language as their primary language. You may know some English, but you probably don't know English in the courtroom. There are specific terms to a courtroom that you just may not be familiar with. That's fine. You don't have to be completely non-English speaking in order to request an interpreter. And you are entitled to an interpreter in any courtroom, so you need to make sure that you request it, no matter what the language.
And don't hesitate to ask. If we can do it, we're going to try our best to get it done. I think that's important. I was in a training about 2 months ago, and the instructor identified herself as neurodiverse. So the person that I am, I started Googling, right? It was like 2 months ago. And I was like, wow, never thought about how many people fall up under that. And it's a term that is becoming popular now, but it's not known much. But I wish that it was on forms so that we can start identifying. So that's something that should be included, because it's different for every individual, and it's hard to put people in a block in this box of who you are and what your disability is. So I was amazed. So if any of you get the opportunity, look up neurodiverse, because your children or you may fall up under that. You may fall up under that. So.
Yes, and especially with something like ADHD, it is extremely hereditary, and often you might not find out that you have ADHD until one of your children is diagnosed. And as you're listening, you're going, a minute, sounds real familiar. And so I, just to kind of give you some background on me, I have ADHD, but I was just diagnosed a year and a half ago, and had done work with people with disabilities, and had a complete blind spot for how that may have showed up in me, and it hit like a ton of bricks when it finally hit. And now I see it. It's very easy to see in other people, but so many things can really affect the way you perceive information, the way you perceive how people are interacting with you. There may be some rejection sensitivity, dysphoria, which is just elevated versions of imposter syndrome, where you just do not feel like you're good enough for certain things. And that's the type of thing that an abuser may play off of, especially in a domestic violence situation. So it's so important to make sure that you understand, your own mental health, and that if you don't feel like things are going the way you hope they will, or you're feeling so exhausted from your mind running so hard all the time, that you get help, that you learn more about yourself. There may be something there that you could get assistance with, so that you could really elevate your presence everywhere. So that doesn't mean that you're broken or that anything is terribly wrong with you. It just means you learn a little differently and you just need to adjust.
That's it. You just learn a little
Hmm.
differently, and it allow us to be able to help you. And I will tell you, an abuser knows that.
Oh, yeah.
They know your disabilities. They know your strength, your weaknesses. They use it against you, and so they may make you feel very bad about it, right? Make you feel
Hmm.
embarrassed. But don't come forward so that we can assist you.
Hmm.
It's important.
Absolutely.
So, from a legal perspective, right? We talked about finding a lawyer, the difference of a family law lawyer and a domestic violence lawyer, being able to go to legal aid regardless of your income status when it comes to domestic violence, and finding those areas, those organizations and areas in your state. Is there anything else that you think that individuals need to know
Hmm.
as it relates to the law if you're in a domestic violence relationship?
Um, I would suggest that anyone who is thinking that they may be going through some form of domestic violence, and that covers everything from physical to emotional to financial. There are so many different areas in which you may be feeling some sort of imbalance of power that someone's exerting over you. Do research about that specific piece where you're feeling that pressure, where you're feeling that, power dynamic shift, so that you can understand the different aspects that might be involved. If you don't realize, that everything that's happening is a part of that control, you might not even realize what type of evidence you have to support a claim that you might need to make. So, that financial control, you may just think, well, I don't work and, my spouse is the breadwinner. So they are the only one that's, they give me an allowance or they let me, do this with the money or that. Well, that is definitely a type of control. And even if you're feeling self-conscious because you don't, make as much money as them, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be entitled to, some input and control over where that money goes. So just doing research about wherever you're feeling the pressure, do research around that power control wheel, because there's a different wheel for, so many different things, and see all the aspects that might be involved in that when you're really trying to advocate for yourself. You know?
And you talked about financial abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people do not understand the financial aspects of their relationship, or think that they have access to any of the money, able to make a big financial decision as hiring an attorney. I want people to understand you don't have to have money.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you could use legal aid. And like
Right.
when individuals call me, I have certain legal aid attorneys that are in different counties that can help. So don't look at money as a reason why you feel like you
Mhm.
can't get an attorney. You can.
Yeah, and I mean it's and even if because legal aid, I mean in reality, a small percentage of attorneys are legal aid attorneys. But there are other organizations like there's it was victim assistance, but I know that they have a different name now. But it's an advocacy, a victim advocacy group in Mecklenburg County. Even if legal aid can't represent you, they have attorneys that they work with. I think they've even hired some in-house attorneys, but they have attorney referral networks. So even if the resources aren't there for every person to have representation, there are other resources where you may get a free consultation with a family law attorney, or they may assign a pro bono attorney, a free attorney to assist you in court who's been trained and supported by an attorney that does that type of work every day. So, there are different initiatives everywhere, but you absolutely won't know if you don't ask. So put the word out there, ask, find out how you can, get to the resources you need.
Those resources are important. And if you don't ask, you won't know what's out there. That's what we fight for. We fight for victim rights.
Mm-hmm.
Fight for that all the time. We're
Mm-hmm.
watching the laws.
Mm-hmm.
We're going before Congress and the Senate. We're asking for the laws to be able to protect you. when you're in a domestic violence relationship. So ask, because you never know what's going on in your state, no matter where you live.
Very true. Very true.
So I have a question on the table, and it's from Carolyn, and she says, "How do you relate to a narcissistic person?" I'll let you go first. What's your take on that?
It depends on what type of interaction I'm having with them. I will say that in a courtroom, as a domestic violence attorney representing only plaintiffs, only the person initiating the protective order, almost every person on the other side of the table was narcissistic in some way. And there's no greater joy than having them admit everything in a way that makes them feel like, they're kind of glorifying something, but really they're just giving the judge everything they need to go ahead and sign that protective order and maybe even initiate some additional criminal charges. So, let them talk about themselves. They will tell you all about themselves, and believe them when they tell you. Um, they're not going to stop. They're not going to ask about you. They're not going to engage with you in a way that is really tangible unless it is to glorify them. And so in a domestic, we understand that type of personality, and we just use that to help you get what you need. They are very predictable typically.
I think that's a great answer. So, one thing about a person that has a narcissistic personality, they think they're smarter than you.
Mm-hmm.
So, how I deal with them is to allow them to think that I am, so that I don't have them on guard, but I'm building while they're going about their way, and they think that they have the power and control. They don't. Once I realize that a person is who they are, and I, like you said, you believe what they say, and I take what they say is a little grain, because they truly believe that they're right. So in their world, they're right in their world, but not in mine. What they say about me and how they put the blame on me is not true. Anything you say about me, I don't believe you. And I'm building a case. I'm using everything that you're saying against me to put it back on you. And you can't do it to them. You really have to do it in court,
Mm-hmm.
because you really can't win in that person's mind. You can't beat them
Mm-hmm.
with your words and with your actions. You beat them in court. That's how I deal with them. Just,
Right.
you have to outsmart them,
Mm-hmm.
because they think that they are definitely smarter than you. And that's what
Yes.
I've noticed.
And I will say, the concern that I always heard from survivors of a relationship that was domestic violence centered with a narcissistic person is, but they're such a great talker. You don't understand. They are going to be so charismatic. You're not going to be able to handle it. And I always remind them, I'm not in a relationship with them. And so any of those things that they're going to say and do are not going to affect me. They don't have that power or control over me. We don't have any history. And so the things that may be persuasive to them or may be making them fearful are not going to work on me. And they're probably not even going to try those things on me. They will have a completely different way of talking to me. And so I'm equipped to handle that. And so I'd like to remind them that, hey, I'm not going to be afraid of this person, and I'm going to be standing by your side, supporting you so that you don't have to be afraid of them.
We come up with a plan. Carolyn, she
Mm-hmm.
said it's all about her. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about me. She said, yes, all about me. But I want you to know that we deal with narcissistic people all the time. It's not nothing new. When
Mostly.
you're in a relationship with them, that's the only one that you're dealing with, right? So that's the one that you know. When you realize that's who they are, like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is who I am with, in a relationship with. But we see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We see it all the time. And so I'm always creative and giving you strategies on what you can do when you're dealing with a person like that. So they don't bother me. I outsmart them all the time. I'll tell you some
Mm-hmm.
things how you can outsmart them. And I will say that if you're in a relationship with one, they're not going to change. Now, if you have a faith, some people do believe that if God could change them, that they would change.
Mhm.
Um, and that's to each their own, how you believe that. But once they're showing you who they are, Melinda said the same thing.
Mm.
Believe them. It's really hard for them to change. And I've met narcissistic people in the church. So
Yeah.
just to give you a tip, people don't change. You change in a relationship. And Carolyn said, not me personally. So thank you for bringing up the question, Carolyn. She's like,
Mhm.
no, it's not me. So thank you for letting us know
Yeah.
that and asking the question for somebody else that may be going through that.
Yeah.
And Melinda said it was in both of her marriages.
Yeah. Well, and that would make sense too, because if that's a personality type that either you're attracted to or you attract, um, it would make sense that it would show up again and again. There's something there. And I always like to remind people that I work with, I don't blame you for getting in a relationship with this person. You may feel some,
Mhm.
oh, how did I get in this relationship? Or, oh, how did I not see the red flags? At some point, things were great. At some point, things were much better than they are by the time you're seeking some help. And that's okay. At some point, there was joy, there was happiness. And whether you're staying to try to hope that that comes back, or thinking that, oh, that just this one thing happened and now it's different, no matter what reason you're staying, we understand that at some point there was something great here. And it's okay if that has changed. So there's no judgment there. There's just support all the way around.
I love it. There is support.
Mhm.
Akusa said, my husband is a control freak, but it don't work for me. I fire right back with scripture from the Bible. I
Mhm.
make him feel like the piece of crap he is. This just started this year, but his friends are the cause of it.
Mm. Well, and as long as you are finding something that is giving you strength to combat the things that you're hearing, that's a very positive thing. But even having to combat something like that every day can take a real toll on you. So I hate that you even have to be in a situation where you have to do that. And I hope that you find that strength. But, if the person, whether it's somebody around them that is getting to them or whether it's just something that was always in them, that's not something you want to be around. There's hope and help for you to get away from it.
And the part that stuck out most to me was his friends are the cause of it. People
Mhm.
might have an influence on you, but at the end of the day, you make a decision on how you treat somebody else. We make
Mhm.
choices,
Yeah.
and you can have outside influence, but at the end of the day, that
Mhm.
person is responsible for how they treat somebody else, and we have to always consider that.
That's it. The
Always.
same thing when somebody says, "Oh, well, it's the alcohol that's the cause. They only do this when they are drunk or when they're high." No, that's still, even knowing that they do those things, there's still that person that is choosing to drink or choosing to stay with you while they're abusive. I mean, there's so many pieces where there are choices, and it's a learned behavior. Abuse is learned. It's not a thing that's just innately in you. So,
It is. Melinda, she says, that's where I am. Why do I attract the narcissist?
mm,
And it's okay. Asking those questions, Melinda, go a long way.
mhm.
It help us for our next relationship. And
Yeah. And that's, really examine what it is that attracted you to those two people. Find out what it was that they had in common that attracted you. And think about why that attracted you. And what might be on the flip side of it. If you liked a really dominant, charismatic personality and you felt like you were the only person that could, soften them up, or they were only treating you like a queen, think about where that changed, where it turned. And that would be the red flag, where, when, really, when did it change? When did it turn? And if you see that again in another relationship, know that that could easily be the outcome again.
we can.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking last week about turning red flags to yellow flags. So
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we do that, right? We look back and be like, I saw some signs. Lord, I saw some signs, but I
Mhm.
went on anyway, even though the red
Yeah.
flags are there. So we have to be careful that we don't see any red flags. Well, we are almost out of time. Is there any last words that you want to say before we get out of here for this evening?
Well, I just want to remind people that, no matter what your situation is, no matter what you're going through, talk to somebody about it. If it's not what you want it to be, at least talk to somebody. If you're not ready to seek any type of assistance to remove yourself from that situation, at least know what your options are when and if you are ready. Um, One of the things I do with my business is I like to empower people to make space for themselves to be able to amplify their own voice. I know as women, sometimes you let either the busyness that's going on around you, or the frustration that you might be feeling, or anxiety or fear stop you from speaking up for yourself and stop you from advocating in a way that's full of the passion that you have. You have to let that fear, anxiety, all of that go out the window and be able to use your voice. And with my business, one of the things I do is like empower people to use that voice for advocacy, for entrepreneurship, for excelling in your own career, in a way that is just inclusive of all. If you've been through domestic violence, you most certainly understand that just because somebody says something one way doesn't mean that that's all they mean. You're usually able to see and hear so much more than somebody who's just kind of listening is not really going to understand. So, um, if you're wondering, how do I amplify my own voice? How do I get past that fear? Or how do I speak more inclusively so people don't feel like they're walked over by things that I'm saying? I'm empowering people. That's what I can help with. And I encourage people to reach out if that's what you need.
I love it. Can you tell individuals how they can contact you?
Sure. Well, I'm on the big social media platforms. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as at Inspired Inclusivity Consulting. But I'm on Facebook, Kelly Durden Posey. You can look me up there as well. LinkedIn, both of those handles. And then you could just email me, KDP, my initials, Kelly Durden Posey, at inspired inclusivity consulting.com.
I love it. Thank you so very much for joining me. Thank you. I hope you all learned something that can help you from a legal perspective. Don't be afraid to get legal advice. Don't be afraid to go and look for legal aid or legal assistance, no matter what it's called in your state, it exists. Victim advocates are always available to assist you. They know the connections in your state from a legal perspective as well. So if you can't Google it and find it, you go to your nearest legal aid office, or if not, you go to a victim advocate. Any victim advocate agency can help you from that standpoint. Even your attorney general's office have information about it as well. So it's out there. It's not hard to find. You can contact us if you need any information from a legal standpoint. I don't give legal advice because I'm not qualified to, and it's different in every state, but I do have individuals that can help you, and I am a good researcher. Our team will find out the resource for you. So don't be afraid to ask. And it's not just my organization that does it, it's all of us that are in this fight together. So thank you. Next week, we are going to have Misty Chaver. She is going to talk about surviving pure hell. She is the last individual that's going to talk about domestic violence this month. So I'm really excited for that opportunity to be able to speak to her. We will also be on October 30th at the Domestic Violence Gala hosted by Grace International. I will also post that. So if you all would love to go to that Domestic Violence Gala, it's a great formal event. You get dressed up, look real cute. You could join us there. I'll be speaking. And so I'm so honored to be able to do that. Thank you for joining Hush No More Champions. We are always here to assist. You can call us at 1-888-285-2161. You can find us on social media, all social media platforms, or you can go to our website at www.hushnomore.org. Reach out to us if you need any assistance This is what we do. We love you. We want you to live the best life that you could possibly live, and we want you to have information. So please share this broadcast with individuals that you think need some legal assistance. It is available. That is how you can successfully get out of a relationship, is knowing the law and how you can use the law to help you in your situation. So thank you once again, Attorney Kelly Durden Posey. You are beautiful and phenomenal. I appreciate you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much for
Thank you.
gracing this platform again. So peace and blessings to you all, and good night.